Hello friends, I made this for. Welcome to a channel about astrology and tarot and how we can relate both into the bigger realms of our world. It's me, your girl. And yeah, let's just dive into it. The first thing I really want to tap into today, of course, you know that this is a video about Taurus because it says Taurus in the description, and we're talking about the Hierophant. And if you are not privy, when I talk about astrology, we're looking at it through the lens of tarot. So last time we talked, it was about Aries, and we talked about specifically Aries through my weirder decks. So today what I wanted to do is take those same cards from my weird deck and kind of use the Emperor, that is Aries, as the gatekeeper to kind of switch into Taurus season, because literally Aries kind of is. When we start the year off on the wheel, the zodiacal wheel, we're starting with the Emperor or Aries, and that is kind of the energy, like I said, that spark that gets us started in that whole process. But then there's the whole, okay, so what energy comes next? And what comes next is yang energy, yin being very outward and movement based, and yang being very inward, stillness. The elements associated in that way are earth and water for yang, and air and fire for yin. So those are the two ends of the spectrum of our four elements that we work with when we're looking at the zodiacal wheel. Now, with that said, we start with fire and we move to air. So we have the fire, and then we start with fire and we go to earth. My bad. So we have that spark, that flame that we've created. And what we kind of do with the next step is to give it a home, give it a place and a space to exist. So let's talk about what that space looks like. But first, let's talk about what is the container holding. So we talked about the Emperor, and we talked about the Emperor and the 8th House Tarot, the Holly Simple Tarot, and of course I always forget the Apparition Spirit Speak Tarot deck, which looks like this. Beautiful, I know. Gorgeous, I know. So what we kind of can take away, and it's kind of hard to tell through these 3 cards because they are the more abstract concepts of what goes around with Aries or the Emperor. Except for this one, there's a fucking ram. So obviously we know what we're talking about, right? Is we're tapping into a sense of authority. So what happens next when we get to the Hierophant? Because in the tarot, we go from the Emperor, that is 4, to 5, that is the Hierophant. So let's dive into what the Hierophant is. So this is our structure, our authority, our fatherly figure when we're looking at it in 8th House Tarot. And as you can see, it even says the Emperor, because this deck is all about the astrology in tarot. And then we come up to here, the Hierophant. So what energy are we transmuting here? Where are we taking this? So to me, this is a great illustration that gives you the idea of the authority and then what that authority can be. So here's the thing about the Hierophant. It gets a bad rap. It's a card that I think feels problematic to people. And it's not that I don't know why. It's just I think we have to rephrase why. Because the Emperor has the same problem, you know? I feel it too. I look at the Emperor and go, wow, there's a lot of my daddy issues coming up right now. So I feel you, friend. But let's not project on this card. Let's use this medicine of the card, shall we? So with that said, we have Taurus. We have the bull right here. The Hierophant in this card is really easy to read because it's a fucking Taurus right there. Excuse me. It's a Taurus. It's the bull. It's that stubborn energy, Or stubborn. It's not really stubborn. It's a knowing that is unrelenting, as I like to put it. So that's the obvious message here. We see an open book. We see a prayer hand. So what we can kind of take here that comes from classic tarot representation of the Hierophant is the Hierophant was sometimes represented or not even represented. So in the past, it was straight up called the Pope card. So obviously very triggering things in that energetically, I know, and just spiritually on a certain level, I understand. But what is the Pope? What is the Hierophant? But a messenger of God's word, right? So if we get down to the nitty gritty, it's a messenger for the people. It's a sharer of truth. Now, with that said, in the past, this card has been associated with spiritual teachers trying to be the authority over you. That might resonate with you. Maybe that really does a number in one of your readings. You pull it up and that's definitely what it means. However, to me, the Hierophant is an invitation. That invitation is really about tapping into how you channel your connection to God, to spirit, your higher power, and transmute that for others. It's not about someone having authority over you. A lot of the times you'll see in old classic depictions of this card, the Pope or the Hierophant sitting and those sitting in front of him. And in those depictions, some people read it as we are the people standing in front of this religious figure. Really, I like to look at it, and this is me, but I like to look at it as we are stepping into that position. And on some of the old cards, we'll see keys. So sometimes people refer to that as the gatekeeper. But again, if we're looking at this through the eyes of Taurus, to me, if we're looking at it through the lens of Taurus, that doesn't resonate really well. That doesn't resonate as you have a gatekeeper in front of you taking authority over your own spirituality. I take it as you are doing the reading here, like in this card. You are doing the work. You are connecting with spirit, your higher self, your spiritual helpers, your ancestors, your people who are there to like help you through your journey, and you're embodying the knowledge that they're here to share and projecting that outward. And that kind of comes up here in this deck as we see this being this connection to like the spiritual self and almost this like connection with the third eye happening in this card. So we can either take this as channeling down or channeling out. So again, it comes down to, it's not about someone's authority over you, though it could if that resonates in a reading, honestly. But what I like to take it as, how are you taking messages that are being sent to you that you might be taking up from the work that you do and are embodying? Because again, for me, this is an archetype we can all embody, right? We can be the spiritual teacher. We can also be that person who is listening to a spiritual teacher. But for me personally, if we're looking at it through the eyes of Taurus, Taurus feels like the physical embodiment of a spiritual teaching, and being that connection from heaven to earth to kind of share the word, the good word, and make it applicable for others, or even just applicable for yourself. It doesn't have to be about everybody else. It could just be how you are living your truth, how you are stepping into that authority, but sharing it. So with the Emperor, there is this idea of being the provider of the physical. And with the Hierophant, as we talked about here, the Emperor is providing the good, like bringing home the bacon. If we're looking at this through the lens of like what is a masculine role in a family or something like that. So that kind of is like laid on the plate in this version of the Emperor. And then the Hierophant is here to channel that down to the earthly realm. So what I love about this card, besides its art is just perfect in every way, is this idea that this heavenly information is being channeled to a very physical space. So from the esoteric in the sky to the earth. And what is Taurus but our first earth sign, our first vessel of knowledge for everything that is being sparked, everything that is growing and is being ignited in Emperor season, Aries season, that structure that we have created out of the fire. So structure maybe not be the worst thing, the best thing, I mean. It's not so much structure as it is, authority. Authority, really. We have the right to present ourselves. We have the right to identify and be who and what we want to be. And really, Emperor energy is about stepping into that authority of identity, if you put it as a connection to Aries. Because let's face it, Aries is I. Aries is the first house. So we have the birth in which we are aware of us, right? It's all about what can I do? What are my limits? What are my structures? It's not about everybody else all the time. There is this opportunity to provide for it, because once we realize us and really what we decide our role to be, we do that in whatever capacity feels right. But whatever role that might be, there might be a spiritual aspect to that. That's when we step into the Hierophant. How can we provide for others and ourselves in a spiritual way, in a spiritual plane, and make it physically real, if that makes sense? So there's a grounded aspect to the Hierophant, in which we continue to evolve. We continue on through to, of course, Gemini, where we relate to others on that level more deeply. But what I think is really magical is, and this is how the whole structure goes. Through the entire wheel, we start with fire, we move to earth, we go to air, and end in water to kind of solidify all three of those lessons in a space that allows for movement and expansion. So if we're looking back on what I said as far as yin and yang energy, well, that's that expansion and contraction. So we have this energy that is outwardly, and then we have the inward energy, which I think is really well documented here. We see this almost the idea of studying. We are becoming a student as well as a practitioner, which is how we always should be. We should always be learning. We should always be growing. We should always be creating that space for ourselves, but also sharing that space and the messages with it. With that said, that's my quickie little dive into Taurus. I think what I'm going to do maybe next week is a little dive into Taurus and Scorpio off of each other. Of course, next week, something to be aware of is the Scorpio full moon. Of course, like I've said before, we have our opposites, the opposition on the color wheel that is the astrological wheel, and that's going to be coming up. Oh, I thought I was going to burp. Next week, Tuesday, I believe. Or is it the 7th? I'll look back on that. But touching base on that later, and we'll dive into some more aspects of the Hierophant, into Taurus, into that magic and medicine. Be good to yourself. I know right now is crazy, so just be careful. Be good to yourself again, and I love you. Bye.